Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about my version of the Forbidden Rite totem Hierophant. This build has been hyped quite a lot by some of the most well-respected content creators like Zizaran, Pox, or Gazi, even before 3.15 actually came out, but since it was a new skill, nobody really knew how exactly it would play out. Well, with the way this skill shotguns and interacts with additional projectiles, I'm here to tell you Forbidden Rite is absolutely crazy. Putting this skill in a totem gives you a plethora of benefits like them sacrificing the HP to cast Forbidden Rite instead of you, and using totem life to scale the damage bonus of Forbidden Rite, which will be a lot higher than your own, increasing your damage massively. Furthermore, we get to use the Rain of Splinters unique jewel to get more overlapping projectiles, and on top we're running a Soul Mantle setup. Soul Mantle coupled with 2 Kikazaro rings and the Sanctum of Thought notable will reduce effects of curses on you by 100%, making it so you get all the upsides of Soul Mantle while not only negating its downsides, but also being curse immune in the process. Since curse immunity on Flask got reworked this patch and map mods are no longer affected by it, this is a huge quality of life improvement on top of everything else, and couple that with the fact that our damage is chaos only and therefore immune to reflect, and you have a build that can run any map mod without problems. We're using the self-inflicted curses further by running a self-flagellation jewel, which gives us a damage bonus for every curse we have on ourselves, for a total of 180% increased damage. Do note that marks do not count. Having to reroll day 1 after being frustrated with my minor, this build definitely saved my Leaguestart, and I gotta say it feels better than most things I even experienced before 3.15. Overall, the skill is an absolute powerhouse, and I would be shocked if it wasn't nerfed next patch, so if you want to play it in its full glory, now is the time. With that being said, let's get into the build portion of the video. Alright, so there we are. I really want to talk about how Forbidden Rite actually works, because it can be a little bit confusing, especially how it searches how many projectiles it shoots, how it determines where the projectiles go. I will explain that in a bit, but just real quick, I'm currently level 90. I have a 5-link Soul Mantle. My gear is pretty trash, honestly. I'm still running Wanderlust, which is kind of OP right now because of the Cannot Be Frozen. But yeah, overall, my gear, the only thing that's good is like that I have the Helm enchant. But overall, most of my investment was into the jewels. And I would say I spend around 250 to 300 chaos at this point, just so you know where we are and you realize just how much improvement this damage could still get. Something I want to point out as well is that I had a really rough league start, so if you're somebody like me who chose a build that just does not really function in 3.15, that isn't really up to par with all the nerfs, then I would definitely say that this kind of saved the league for me. So if you're somebody who's really annoyed right now with the game, maybe give it another shot, maybe give this build a shot, because this feels better than my 3.14 Leaguestarter, and I'm not over-exaggerating. This build has been extremely fun, and like I said in the intro, if you want to play this build in its glory days, it will definitely have to be this league, because this will get nerfed 100%. Now, as for Forbidden Rite, I put it out of the totem setup real quick so I can explain to you how it actually looks like. So you can see that it already has base damage, which gets scaled by levels, but most of your damage will come from the part where it says deals 12% of your max life as base chaos damage, which will get scaled off of totem life, which is around 13k in my case. It will go up to like 15k if you're min-maxed. But important to know about this is the 12% of max life as chaos damage does not scale with levels. So getting levels on the skill is actually not that important. I just want to point this out because it only scales the base value. Now, the totem harms itself, but with a medium cluster jewel that gives us chaos res, that's actually not that big of a deal. And also, Hierophant will make it so the totems are actually regening, so it will not basically harm itself that much. Now, so how this skill actually functions, if we read it. Lobs an exploding projectile near the targeted location and extra projectiles toward enemies around you. The projectiles deal chaos damage based on your life and energy shield. Casting this spell damages you. Now, the last line here is the most important one. Fires extra projectiles at up to 7 surrounding enemies. What you have to understand with this line is that this does not interact with additional projectiles. These are separate projectiles that are just going to get lobbed at enemies that are around you. So if there's one enemy around you, it will fire one projectile at that enemy. If there's 7 enemies around you, it will shoot 7 projectiles at nearby enemies. What that means is it is not the same as your initial cast. So for example, if I'm casting here, there is no nearby enemy, and when I'm casting, I don't get a single projectile from this surrounding enemy projectile thingy. But against single targets, for example, even if you have no additional projectiles, it will still fire 2 because it will go for the initial cast, which will have 1 projectile. And on top of that, you will also get the additional projectile because there is an enemy. So even if you have no additional projectiles, this deals twice the damage. That's the most important thing to realize. And then additional projectiles only get added to your initial cast. So this does not scale up the extra projectiles to surrounding enemies. It only adds to this initial cast of the totem, which is huge, by the way. This means that additional projectiles actually go very well with it. Right now, we only have 2 projectiles. This is only from the Helm enchant, but we also do get the Rain of Splinters unique jewel, which makes it so we have another 2 projectiles for a total of 4. Now, do note, however, that this has a very interesting dynamic with something like GMP, for example. I just put GMP into the setup right now, and what you see is we get a lot of projectiles here, which can all theoretically overlap. But the more projectiles you get, the more spread out these are. As you have seen, if we only have 2 projectiles, they're basically on top of each other, right? We have 2 projectiles, they both shotgun, very easy. But the more projectiles you introduce, the more area of effect you actually need to overlap these. So number one thing to note is concentrated effect for this skill is an absolute no-go. Absolute no-go. If you're wondering why I don't have it in my setup, even though on POB it would show the most damage, it makes it so you overlap less. So be sure to only scale GMP if you actually have the AoE to support it. For example, in my case, I deemed the perfect amount of projectiles for my AoE. I'm scaling quite a bit of AoE, but the perfect amount for me is 4. So I get +1 from the helmet, and then I get +2 from the Rain of Splinters, and obviously also +1 because it shoots 2 regularly because of the extra projectiles up to 7 surrounding enemies, which is also why I don't have GMP in my setup currently. Although once I have a 6 link, I will maybe think about reintroducing it. I did have GMP, note, I did have GMP in until I got my Rain of Splinters and until I got the Helm enchant. So I only kind of removed it afterwards for a faster casting to make it a little bit smoother because this skill has a very long cast time. But yeah, that's overall what I have to say about the skill. It's a very interesting one. Don't go for too much +2 gem levels, which you usually go for. It's kind of a reflex when you're a spellcaster. It's not that great with this build. Rather go for totem life. As for Ascendancy, we are using a Hierophant, and the Ascendancy is actually really interesting because there's 2 ways you can go here. The 4 no-brainer points are Pursuit of Faith for totem duration, doesn't really matter, but you get 100% placement speed and +1 to number of totems. Do note that the small nodes also give mana regen and totem placement speed which fit perfectly into the build. And then we get Ritual of Awakening. We're at a total of 6 totems, so this gives us 30% more damage, 1.5 mana, 3% of mana regen per second, and 6% life. And this also counts for your totems, which is really, really nice because the totems do expend some HP, obviously, to cast Forbidden Rite. But here's the spicy part. Do you go for Sanctuary of Thought and Divine Guidance, or do you go for Ailment Immune with Illuminated Devotion? Now, it's kind of hard to say. I personally went for this path down here, and I will explain why, but I will also tell you what you can do with this path up here. Now, I initially wanted to go a little bit more aggressive, do a little bit more damage, actually reserve a lot of my mana for stuff like Zealotry and Skitterbots, and by the way, you can still do that, but I opted for this one here because I got one-shot a lot by the League mechanic. So basically everything in this game is fine for this build at the current HPs. Also, you get some ES scaling, but the League mechanic is a big no-no, and you also die to like Baron stuff and like hunter mobs and whatnot. So it just got kind of annoying for me. So I went this route. You also get a little bit more damage than Divine Guidance and the Transfiguration of Mind. Do note that this path down here is actually more damage than this path up here because they nerfed Arcane Surge, which is pretty funny. So the only thing that really comes down to is this will give you a lot more mana. So if you are like Mind Over Matter, like I am, definitely go for this route down here. It will also give you 50% less mana cost of skills, which is huge for this build. These totems cost like 200 mana if you don't somehow bring it down. So yeah, for me, this was kind of a no-brainer. It also gives you a ton of VS. And also a big thing is 1% increased AoE per 50 unreserved max mana up to 100%. Now, we can't make full use of that because it wouldn't be worth. We're not an Archmage build. We don't really scale that much, but we do have 2.2k mana, so it's around about 45% increased AoE, which is still very, very good. Now, if you want to go for a more aggressive playstyle and you don't mind dying, you can go up to Illuminated Devotion. This node here is really, really bad. All it gives you is 50% increased effective Arcane Surge, which isn't that good anymore since they removed cast speed, because you can already very easily where is it? You can very easily get Arcane Surge when you totems. You don't even have to Flame Dash or anything. You just get Ancestral Inspiration, and you kind of get it for free. So this node is really bad. The Traveling nodes are a little bit more Arcane effect, but whatever. These actually give you max mana, so the small nodes are better as well. But the big thing here is you do get 30% AoE. The spell damage leech does nothing for you, which is, yeah, it's a lot of wasted stats, right? So you get 30 AoE here, but you get a little bit more here, but it kind of makes up a little bit. But you do get non-damaging ailments have 50% reduced effect on you while you have Arcane Surge, which can be, with this cluster here, can basically be made so you're ailment immune. But I have to say that I'd rather not get one-shot. I opted out of Zealotry and Skitterbots, but if you want to go the Zealotry and Skitterbots route and go for a more offensive playstyle, probably take this up here. As for gear, the big star in our build is a Soul Mantle. Currently, it's only 5 linked, so it does obviously decrease the damage a bit. But what's important about this one is it's super synergistic with this build. Not only do you get the level 20 spell totem, but in this build, it also scales the totem life. 50% totem life gets to around like 15% more damage on its own, and you also get an additional totem. For me, this is an absolute no-brainer. Now, basically, you have to kind of circumvent the last line here. Inflicts a random hex on you when your totems die with 80% more effect. Hexes are everything but marks, basically. So stuff like Flammability, LA Weakness, stuff like that, not stuff like Assassin's Mark or Poacher's Mark. So you're inflicting yourself with a lot of curses, so you have to negate it because those curses also have 80% more effect. Probably the most efficient ways to deal with the curses stuff is a Viridi's Veil, which is currently 9x, so it's kind of not in my budget in my day 3 budget at the moment. That would probably be the best way, and then just run a Magic Ring to negate it. But you can also run a Aziri's Reflection, which is also too expensive right now. What we're left with right now is 2 Kikazaru rings, which give us in total 80% reduced effect of curses. It also gives us quite a bit of mana and life regen. It's actually quite good. On top of that, you also have Vitality, so that's a lot of flat regen. Now that's 80%, and then you also get the Sanctum of Thought, notable for a total of 100%. And you're done. So that's the rings. Do note that we have a lot of uniques here that basically do not give you any life, so you have to kind of compensate for that on the passive tree. Now my wand is pretty shitty. Like I have flat mana, proc speed. Now proc speed is actually really, really nice to have with Forbidden Rite, since it will actually take time to hit the enemy, and if the enemy is moving, that will mean that sometimes it doesn't actually hit. So what you can do about that is get projectile speed and get more AoE. This just spell damage. You want spell damage, max mana, plus 1/2 Chaos Gems is actually not that good. Don't fall for it. But whatever. Now, as for gloves, these are super shitty. I don't think I have to talk about them. They kept my res. As for helmet, I just bought the first Forbidden Rite fires an additional projectile enchant helmet that I could afford. This is only item level 78, but whatever. I threw some life essences, some greed essences on there, and just hit this, which I was really happy with, and that's fine. As for belt, a leather belt, obviously. Later you can go for some other stuff like a good Stygian Vice. You can maybe even craft it with chaos damage. Our amulet, nothing special here as well. This is now do note that we allocated Ironwood, which is down here. This is a very, very cheap anoint. It doesn't cost you anything. You can find the oils in like, if you get 2 blights, you will find the oils for this. It's nothing, and it gives us increased totem life, which is increased damage for us. It also gives it, the rest is kind of whatever. You get a little bit of armor, but in terms of damage, this is a very, very cheap anoint that actually does a lot of damage. Also, our shield is very trash. I hope you see a pattern here. Like, we don't have much damage in here. There's like so much more damage you can actually grab with this. But right now, since our jewels are pretty bad, we can't really cap our resistances on jewels. So yeah, we just have to kind of do with this. But there's a few 100% spell damage that you can still get out of this, and a lot of more cast speed. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So especially when you look at the POB damage numbers. Now, this is just to cap our resistances, and Wanderlust is just here as a placeholder. I definitely want Cannot Be Frozen in this league, because the league mechanic is nasty when it comes to freezes. So I cannot afford the 1x, or I don't want to afford the 1x boot enchant right now, because I don't want to throw it on some weak boots. So I would first have to get really good boots and then get Cannot Be Frozen on it, because the craft costs an X. But yeah, I just have Wanderlust here for now. Who cares? Yeah, my items are definitely not very spicy. As for flasks, let's quickly talk about it. So my flask setup is not really thought out. Just be aware of this. So right now, if we look at my stash, we have these Instilling Orbs and Enkindling Orbs right here, right? Which is very interesting stuff that I didn't really engage with yet. There's some YouTubers out there who have some good guides on how you can actually automate your flasks. Right now, I'm not thinking about it too much. I'm just kind of grinding, filling out my Atlas. I haven't come that far, unfortunately, because I was kind of busy. But yeah, so the thing is, you definitely want a life flask of staunching still to get rid of bleeds and corrupted blood. Right now, we don't really have corrupted blood, but we will get it soon. Now, do note that we do use a quartz flask, which is extremely important. Don't mind the additional Eddy res here. It doesn't do anything. We're capped without it. But yeah, the phasing is huge for a totem playstyle, because you can place, and while the totems do the work, you can already run through the packs. It is absolutely necessary. Now, right now, I have 2 Quicksilver flasks. I might later replace the wand with a dagger, might even go double dagger and maybe scale some crit. And then I can get Whirling Blades, which would overall be a lot faster than Flame Dash playstyle. But I haven't come around to it really. I don't really have the points to scale crit at the moment, so I don't really know how that would even look like. I think crit might actually be a bait here, or if you go crit, you will have to abandon mana scaling completely, and then you will look at like 4.5k life maybe, which would be kind of iffy. Like I said, I do not want to run this league on 4.5k life. Now I do have a Enduring Mana Flask. It's just a little bit nicer to use. But yeah, I do have 2 Quicksilver Flasks right now to kind of circumvent the whole flask nerf stuff, and I always want to have a Quicksilver up. But yeah, I just have some cast speed on the Mana Flask, and yeah, nothing really spicy here. Definitely do look at other content creators, what kind of ideas they have for flasks. I will come around to it eventually, but right now I have more pressing issues. As for jewels, we're using 3 unique jewels. 2 of them are very important, one of them is kind of optional. And then we're using some rare jewels. The rare jewels are basically just cast speed, totem life. This is only a 2-stat jewel, unfortunately. But something like this maybe would be nice. A lot of cast speed, some life. Totem life is also good as well, obviously. And now, the most important one here is self-flagellation. You definitely should look at the roll. It rolls between 10 and 20%. It will make a huge difference whether you have 10 or 20, because 10 is only 90% increased damage, while 20 would be 180. So, yeah. This is huge. Once again, this does not count your hexes. It only counts your hexes. It does not count marks. So if you're in POB, you will notice that if you put the curses on in the calc section, it won't take stuff like Assassin's Mark, just to point that out. But yeah, this is absolutely huge. This is a lot of increased damage for the build, obviously, just for 1 jewel. Now, Rain of Splinters is super important for this build. It gets you from 2 to 4 projectiles. You probably won't be able to afford this Helm enchant right now. Like I said, this build is kind of meta. Yeah, definitely go for Rain of Splinters as fast as you can. And you can divine it later. Just go for any roll as soon as you can. I actually have the Spire of Stones in here. Now, the totems cannot be stunned is actually not that important, since your totems will have such a high life pool that they will basically never be stunned. But just on the off chance, and also, as you can see with the way I pathed here, the problem with these nodes is there's damage, but then there's LE damage and fizz damage, which both don't do anything for us. So the only two options is either you go through the regen here, or you go through the strength. I went for the strength because then I can use Spire of Stone. In total, this gives us a 21% increased totem lives, and totem cannot be stunned. So it's fine. The only reason I really have this in is because I want to eventually buy a Corrupted Blood one. I should probably do this right now. But yeah, you want to be Corrupted Blood immune, and getting it on a normal jewel while also having some good mods on it is very hard. So unique jewels are obviously very good at getting that. As for gem setups, do note that obviously not all my gems are used, so you can definitely play around with it a little bit more, maybe introduce a cast when damage taken setup. Currently I have Steel Skin on left click right here, so it's always up basically. But yeah, let's talk about what I have here. Now, number one is obviously you want the Spell Totem with Forbidden Rite. The Spell Totem is already on the Soul Mantle, so you get it automatically. But then you also want to have multiple totems, so you actually put down 2 totems at once, which is going to be huge because we will have 6 totems. Now, do note this is also a reason why I didn't really go for +1 totems on shield, because getting an uneven number of totems will be kind of weird. You would have to cast a 4th time just to get an additional totem, and with multiple totems, I don't think it's actually worth it. It's probably better to just go for spell damage and some more resists to fill out the build and get your damage elsewhere. But obviously, +1 totem is also a way to go. Now, do note that I want to put that here because we are self-casting Wither. Do note that you can also go for +1 totem and then do a Wither totem setup. So you could put Wither on a totem and then go 6 normal totems and 1 totem that is only for Wither. But I feel that would be kind of a clunky playstyle. And yeah, you can experiment around with it, but basically, Forbidden Rite, multiple totems. Then we have Controlled Destruction, which is an absolute powerhouse in this build. We have Void Manipulation, same thing. And at the end, we have Faster Casting. There's some other things that do a little bit more damage, like probably GMP against single targets is overall a little bit better, but I just love the way the Faster Casting makes it feel like. You have to remember, Forbidden Rite has a 0.75 second cast time on top of the spell damage, which will give it even less cast speed. So you're looking at a pretty slow cast. We are scaling quite a bit of cast speed on the tree, and I think with perfect gear you will be able to replace faster casting, but at the start definitely run it. It will feel a lot smoother. Then we have a Steel Skin setup that is basically on our left click, and it is Steel Skin with increased duration. And then we also have a Despair in here. It's just in there to get the increased duration as well. Now, basically, we put our Steel Skin on left click, and then we're just moving around. We have it up for a little bit over 2 seconds, and then it goes down again. And once it's back up, you automatically cast it again. It's just a little bit of automation. You can also go for a cast when damage taken setup. Now, as for our Wither setup, basically also Despair, obviously, is the curse that we're casting. We cannot really go for a cast on. Once you have another way to get around the curse, the curses on you, for example, if you get Viridius Veil or the Azirius Reflection, you can replace these rings with a Despair on hit ring, which will be huge. But right now we have to basically self-cast a curse. Now we have that in with, we have the Wither setup, with faster casting and increased duration. So we are actually self-casting Wither. It's actually a lot smoother. Like, we have a lot of placement speed, so you just put it down and then you Wither at anything, which is also really nice because it slows. It works really, really well against the League mechanic. So yeah, self-casting hasn't been a problem yet. The Arcane Surge isn't necessary anymore since I now have the medium cluster jewel here. The Ancestral Inspiration, which we're going to go over. But yeah, I just have Flame Dash right now. You probably want to substitute this with maybe like Smoke Bomb or something. You can play around with it. Like I said, maybe the best way to go is with a Dagger or something and then go Whirling Blades, because Whirling Blades looks a lot spicier this league. But yeah, we just have Flame Dash here. And at the end, we're just rounding this out with a Vitality and a Clarity. Now, obviously, these are very, very good for this build because we are Mind Over Matter, so we don't want to reserve too much mana. Usually, these are kind of a strain on your mana, but in a Mana Stacker build, they have flat mana reservation, so you can barely see the difference, and they're a huge amount of regen, so definitely go for them. And at the very end, I still have a cast on death portal setup, which isn't really necessary. Like I said, I was kind of frustrated with dying, but then I respec into Divine Guidance and Sanctuary of Thought, went Mind over Matter, which cost me a little bit of damage, but overall it feels a lot better. So this is kind of a leftover from back then. You don't really need it. But if you go the more aggressive route and you actually reserve your mana, you should definitely pack this, because otherwise you will have a problem with the League mechanic. As for the passive tree, as I already mentioned, it's a very awkward to path out here because neither Fizz nor Ellie damage does anything for you. So the only two ways you have, if you run Spire of Stone, you path through here to get the strength for the extra maximum totem life. But otherwise, just path out of here with the increased mana and life regen. It's, I guess, fine. But yeah, you basically want to grab Precision. This also gives us some decks, which we'll need, which we're kind of starved on. I get the full AoE wheel because for overlaps, AoE is actually really, really important, but you can play around with that. It also depends on how much mana you have unreserved and how much mana, how much AoE you actually get from Sanctuary of Thought. There's obviously a point where you have enough AoE, but I don't think I've reached that yet. Now, I just went for life up here. Now, in the end, we want 2 cluster jewels, but right now I only have 1. So the only important thing I would say, since right now, if you're watching this while it's like week 1 or whatever, there won't be good cluster jewels around, or if they are, they're like 8x. What you want is Unholy Grace and a keystone that will make it so Unholy Grace is in the front here. So these are just normal chaos damage nodes. Obviously, this will get a lot easier if you have 3 stats. But yeah, so the important thing are the medium cluster jewels. So there is 3 things you definitely want in this build. 2 things that are, I would say 1 thing that is like mandatory, and 2 things that are complementary but extremely strong. The mandatory one kind of is Ancestral Preservation. So I say mandatory, but I actually played with this up to like, without this up to like level 78 or something. So it's definitely okay, but you will have to resummon your totems a lot more, because your totems take damage from your Forbidden Rite, and it is chaos damage. So you want chaos res on them, and you cannot get chaos res on your totems from the tree, funnily enough. This is the only way, and it gives you 40%. Now, totems usually have 20%, but that is the base of totems. They have 40% elemental res and 20% chaos res. This gets it up to 60%. If you want to go even further, which you probably should at endgame, you want to take another cluster jewel, basically same setup with this chaos wheel, and then get another one of these. It really does not matter. It's not really a sacrifice, because the 30% totem life gives you a ton of damage, and then you on top get the chaos res. If you have another one, you go from 60 to 75, which will basically mean the totem takes almost no damage. Also note that totems do regenerate life with the Hierophant node right here, so it's not that big of a deal, but 1 is very, very important and should be something you're kind of rushing to. Now, this second node here is whatever. I would have even taken this if there wasn't the second notable here. I guess I got kind of lucky. I rerolled into Ancestral Echo. I actually rolled all of these myself. Do not really buy them. Right now, they're very, very expensive. Buy the base, which is also expensive, but not as crazy expensive as the already rolled ones are. Now, on this one, I have Sleepless Sentries, which is the second most important notable, and it gives you Onslaught if you summoned a totem recently. You can also run a Silver Flask, but it is kind of crowded, so definitely go for this one. It will always be up. You will always get the 20% cast speed and 20% movement speed, which is huge. And this one is kind of optional. I wouldn't have really gone for it, I'm going to be honest, but I hit it with Sleepless Sentries, which is really, really lucky. Gain Arcane Surge when you summon a totem. Spells cast by totems deal increased damage, whatever. So you do get Arcane Surge without having to proc it from Flame Dash, which can be nice because sometimes against bosses you don't want to just waste your Flame Dash charges just to get a little bit more damage. So this one kind of prevents that, which is nice. While mapping, it won't really make much of a difference. Obviously, it also means that you don't have to, that you can kind of spare a gem socket for some other setup that you can decide. But yeah, that's basically it for the cluster jewels. Other than that, we're going to go over it in the leveling section, but obviously Ancestral Bond. Grab as much life as you can. Chaos Res is really, really important. Also, very important to note is you want this Chaos Pen right here. Chaos Pen is super premium in this build. You will notice that there's like no sources of Chaos Pen. So this is kind of the only 8% that you have. The note here is also nice, but these two are funnily enough just the big boys here. And also, obviously, go for Corruption. Increased effect of Withered. Well, it's fine. But yeah, you definitely want to grab this wheel. Then I opted to go for mana up here. Like I said, you can go for crit. Overall, I didn't really feel like it was worth it. You would just get one shot. But if you want that playstyle, go for crit. Obviously, I still have a jewel to fill out here. I haven't really found a good one, but I definitely should at some point. Now, I went for Deep Thoughts for a little bit more mana. Always look that your mind over matter is kind of... since we have 40% MOM, so we have mind over matter here with 30%, but we also have the 10% here from Divine Guidance for a total of 40%. So also always make sure that this is kind of how you balance your mind over matter and your life. So if you take a big damage hit, that you will actually have enough mana to take that hit. And we're scaling up here. We're just scaling Mystic Bulwark. The big one here is Prodigal Perfection, which is a lot of extra spell damage. You can obviously scale this one even further. I'm only level 90 right now, so I'm missing a ton of points. But yeah, as I said, also focus on AoE because it will make the overlaps a lot nicer. As for leveling, now I do see a lot of people who are saying you should level as something different. For example, Freezing Pulse Totems, which is completely fine, right? You can do it. I personally like leveling as what I'm like. I like to see the progress throughout the campaign. Especially my first build or your second build or whatever this is going to be for you. But you can definitely level with Forbidden Rite Totems. I'm just going to point that out. Now, you're going to have to place it more often because it can shoot like 4 times or something before it kills itself. But just be aware that that's actually not that big of a deal during the campaign. It will do a ton of damage, especially if you have an early Rain of Splinters. Now, what I would say is if you don't have a Karui word, so for example, if you're like just starting out and you're level 18 and you don't even have like an Alka or a Chaos or whatever a Karui word costs right now, don't go for it because this skill will feel very clunky. At the start, you don't have a lot of cast speed and you will need the projectile speed from this real badly. So if you're leveling with this, just level as a normal totem build with Spell Totem, with Forbidden Rite, and go for multiple totems at level 38. The only important thing is get Karui Ward or get projectile speed elsewhere. Also really nice are Winds of Change. I think I actually have them still here. Yeah, Winds of Change are actually really, really good just for leveling. You can equip them at 47. Gives you proj speed, a lot of damage. The knockback is whatever, but these are really, really nice. I even wore these up to like level 70, I want to say. So those are pretty cool. Obviously, Wanderlust, Gold Rim, normal stuff. If you have a Tabula, obviously, you already know what to do. But yeah, overall, this build has been very smooth while leveling. The clear is a little bit iffy because at the start, when you don't have a lot of cast speed and you don't have a lot of proj speed, things will actually miss because you also don't have the AoE to kind of give it a good spread. But once that kind of gets going, you're good, and it will do a lot of damage against campaign bosses and stuff like that. You will actually be surprised. So I would say if you have like the chaos around to kind of make this leveling a bit easier. For example, I ran a Saboteur first. I had to reroll because it was trash. So I already had some of these leveling items lying around. I had a Gold Rim, I had a Karui Ward, and I had a Winds of Change. I did not have a Tabula at that time. So the leveling, if you have like some of these 1 Chaos Uniques already, or if you can afford them, the leveling as Forbidden Totems is actually very smooth. Now, I did not have this one here, so obviously my totems were kind of dying a lot to their own casts. If you have this one, I think leveling will be a total breeze. Now, do note, obviously, that you have to be level 54, but if you have this already lined up for level 54, it will make your life a lot easier. But yeah, I would say you can do whatever you want for leveling. Hierophant is really, really nice in that way. You can go Holy Flame Totems, you can go Freezing Pulse Totems, you can go whatever you want to and then respec once you're at Ancestral Bond. But I'm just gonna real quickly point out how I leveled the build. So what I did was basically path out of here, actually. So I took the damage. I already know that I wanted to be Forbidden Rite Totems, and I don't want to level with Freezing Pulse Totems. Obviously, if you want to go Freezing Pulse Totems, this is totally fine to go like this. But I went straight for here. Then I went for Retribution, because it's just too efficient of a point. But then all I did was rush straight to Ancestral Bond right here. I did take this note, though, because this increased totem life. I actually took both immediately, I think, because the placement speed was also nice. And once you're here, you're basically you can do whatever you want. Now I went first up, I went for Shamanistic Fury because at this time you won't yet have the Hierophant node for the extra placement speed. Where is it? You won't have Pursuit of Faith, so your placement speed will be kind of low. So I just took this here for a total of 35% placement speed and also some good damage. Then I went here for Arcanist's Dominion. At that point, I had some good damage going, so I went for some life, for the most efficient ones at least. I went for Discipline and Training, I went for Heart and Soul, and I went for Purity of Flesh, just to be a little bit more tanky. You don't have to do this right away. I would just go ahead and do it before Act 5, because Act 5, the mobs hit a lot harder, and you will see the increase. If you need Dex, go for Precision, or just go for this Dex node here. I then also very quickly went for the AoE wheel, because it will make a huge difference at the start, because you don't have any other AoE scaling whatsoever. I went for the mana later up here. What I did next was basically go down here. I didn't even take Devotion for now. I felt tanky enough. And I went all the way down here to Primal Manifestation. This one is huge. You can scale your totem life quite a bit. So you get the damage placement speed, and then you go through the totem life nodes here. I actually think I picked up the whole wheel at that time because the cast speed was also just really nice for feel-good stuff. Then I think I needed the dex, so I took the Precision. I don't remember exactly though. Then I went for the second AoE cluster right here, full AoE. It will feel great. After that, I think I started to respec because I got the unique jewel, the Spire of Stone unique jewel for the extra totem life. So what I did was I grabbed this one here. I got the Spire of Stone, and I slowly but surely took these notes here to kind of make sure that I can respec in a sec. And then I took this and this. And once you're done with that, you can now respec all of these points right here, which is what I did. And at that point, I just went for some more life here. And you slowly but surely wanna transition into this cluster jewel. But before you do that, you also definitely want to take corruption here with the damage penetration. At this point, it's very, very strong. Now, I did also pick these ones at the time. If you feel like you need more damage, do it. I did it and then later respect. I also took Mental Rapidity, which I later respect, but this is actually really, really nice. Every cast speed you can get will make the build feel a lot better. At this point, your playstyle will get a lot nicer because you already have Pursuit of Faith and Ritual of Awakening, which will be your first Ascendancy points. But I also took Tireless on top just to make the mana cost a little bit easier. It is very important to go for it until we have Sanctuary of Thought. Although I didn't end up respecking them because, I mean, they are kind of worth just for the life, obviously. Now, at this point, you can just put your points into whatever, some more damage, some more life. I kind of prepared. What I did first was buy some like basic jewels with like 2 stats for like a chaos, like totem life plus cast speed or something like that, and put them in here. I think I also took Devotion. But what you definitely want to prepare for is the large cluster jewel right here. Doesn't matter whether you go here or here, both the notes here obviously both do nothing. But you want to prepare and save up for a large cluster jewel. Now, what I want to tell you is it doesn't really matter if you have notables on it or whatever. It's more important to save up your money for the medium cluster jewels. For these ones, you want these to be at least level 68. Make sure of that, because only then you can actually get the Onslaught mod and the Ancestral Preservation. They only roll 68 or higher. So save up for these and just buy some complete trash. I had even worse ones here. I had like one notable that I had to grab down here. It does not matter. At the start, even these small nodes are completely fine and they're still worth taking. So you're not really losing out on too much. You're just introducing more damage into the build. So definitely save up for these medium cluster jewels and save up for Rain of Splinters. Now, obviously you might ask, how can I upgrade this build? Because Palsteron, you're kind of broke. I'm just going to say it right here. You're kind of broke. You haven't played, you have actually slept, so you have very little currency. You're kind of a noob, so I want to take this build to the next level. How can I do that? Well, number one would be get your curse immunity elsewhere. So get it from either Viridi's Veil or Adziri's Reflection, whatever you prefer. Adziri's Reflection would be a lot easier because then you will not get the Helm enchant on a Viridi's Veil realistically, unless you farm it yourself for like hours and hours. So I would probably just go for a normal helmet with the Forbidden Rite enchant, and then go for a Adziri's Reflection in the shield slot. But you can also go for Viridi's Veil, not go for the extra projectile, which I think is a mistake. But you can do it and then go for like +1 totem shield with some spell damage. Maybe if you go crit, some spell crit. But yeah, putting this build, scaling this build to crit, like I said, if you want to go full all out, you can go Zealotry, you can go Skitterbots, you can scale auras and do a lot more damage. I personally do not find it worth the points. Like, even right now, if I wanted to go crit, I would have to basically not take this next cluster that I will take. So the next cluster is still really, really good. There's still a lot of good points to take. So introducing another multiplier is not really worthwhile, in my opinion, since this build also has Totem Life as its multiplier, which kind of functions as a sort of replacement for crit. Also on top of that, don't forget that Diamond Flask got nerfed, so you will actually need a lot more investment into crit to actually make it worthwhile. Also get better boots. Obviously, you can get Cannot Be Frozen on boots as a craft, so you want 30% movement speed, as high life as you can, and then 1 prefix open to craft Cannot Be Frozen. In the suffixes, do whatever. There's some totem-specific stuff on some influence mods, so you can go for that. But you definitely want the Cannot Be Frozen, in my opinion. And yeah, just go for resistances or whatever. Like I said, a Stygian Vice is probably a lot better than a leather belt. Also, you can do a lot with gloves. For example, go for blind on hit, which would be huge. From I don't remember the base. Was it Redeemer? I don't know. But yeah, there's still a lot you can do. Obviously, get a better wand. Although I would keep the projectile speed, I'm just going to point that out, but you definitely want more cast speed and more increased spell damage. Once again, do not fall for the +1 Chaos skill gems. It's a fine mod, but it's not as good as you think it is. But yeah, other than that, you can definitely do a lot in the flask slot. Obviously, a Bottled Faith, even if we don't scale crit, is still an extremely strong flask for the region from the Consecrated Ground and the 10% more damage, obviously. In the jewel sections, obviously get better jewels. Basically, this is day 3 gear, right? Like, just get better stuff is basically what I'm saying. But that's it for the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe. You can also follow me on twitch.tv/Palsteron. I will be starting to stream real soon. You can also tip or support me on patreon.com/Palsteron if you like the video or what I do. Now, like I said, this build has been a blast. I've had a lot of fun. This was actually better than my 3.14 build. So yeah, like I said, if you're frustrated with the League, kind of how hard the earlier acts are, definitely give this one a shot. I think you will be pleasantly surprised, especially since the totem playstyle is very nice against the League mechanic with how safe it can be. It can kind of be a little bit further back. Whereas with mines and traps, you sometimes have to be a little bit more in the gist of things. So yeah. But other than that, I hope this kind of helped you out. Obviously, I want this build to go a lot. This build will go a lot further with a lot of people. You can push it way more. You can probably double the DPS of this build if you invest like 10 to 15x. So I would love to see what you guys have in store for that. But yeah, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.